right? Um, you know, we we come from we come from an era where the sun was never supposed to set on the empire and all of that, and then it finally set, etc., etc. Now, as far as this particular cause goes, we're seeing a bit of a sunrise of our own, right? Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had five or actually six now countries giving back our heritage to our honorable Prime Minister. As Makranji says, a lot of people take credit for all the work that the government is doing. We can only request, we can only, we can be advocates for the cause, we can push it. But at the end of the day, the government has to decide that this is something they prioritize. And I'm personally ecstatic and honored that the current dispensation in India is taking this as a cause they prioritize. Um, if you can just see the numbers here, in the first 65 years of India's independence, a total of 13 objects came back to India. That's 13 objects over 65 years. That's roughly one object every 5 years. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've had 232 objects offered back to us. Think of that as a spike. Where we had one object every 5 years, we're talking of 236. Huge spike. That comes only when a lot of crazy factors come in together. There's a narrative that's changing across the world. There's an Indian government that is willing to be a little more assertive. Our diplomatic effort is changing. There's a bunch of middle-aged guys like me who are saying that, hey, listen, let's go out there, make it happen. So I think a lot of, uh, I mean, honestly, the only thing I can ascribe this to is destiny or timing or whatever it is. As much as Makranji or anybody else would say that, hey, this is Anurag. No, this is not Anurag. If anything, this is the government. If anything, it is the bunch of amazing volunteers that I'm blessed to have, and a sense of timing. Right. But more importantly, more than these numbers, here is why we do this. Here is a picture of the temple the Nataraja was stolen from. Here is how the temple looks like when the Nataraja actually comes back. More than the stone and the picture and what have you, look at what it does to the community. On the left, you have shrubs and moss and a dog walking around. On the right, you have a whole community coming out to celebrate the return of the person, you know. And again, I'm saying person. It is not an object. It is not a murti. It is definitely not an idol or a statue. Right? The Nataraja was something that they associated. When that came back, it energizes society as a whole. And that's what we're doing here. Right? Now let's go back. Let's go back to Indiana Jones and the narrative that Makaranji was talking about. Was Indiana Jones a hero or was he a villain? And Alex, while I was preparing for this, Alex actually sent me a little tweet saying the evolution in the morality of Indiana Jones, where between 1981, his first movie, and 1989, his third film. So in the first film, Indiana Jones says, "Hey, this belongs to a museum," and progressively, two films later, he says that, "Hey, listen, this belongs in situ," and it's a good evolution for Indiana Jones uh, to have gone through. However, the question still remains that was Indiana Jones a hero, or uh, was he Spielberg's con? Right? Just because Hollywood had a superior ability, um, to fund their narrative better, for better special effects, better editors, cinematographers, what have you, better distribution networks across the world. Were they able to sell their idea of an aggressor that waltz in and takes whatever he feels like? And that's the question we're here to answer today. We really need to sit down and question not just the dead bodies, the resources, but the heritage that the empire was founded on and grew on. Right? And it's time for us to forcefully have that conversation today. Um, for those of you who watched Black Panther, I'm sure you remember Killmonger. Killmonger's turn to the dark side happens when he sees heritage from his community or nation or civilization stolen and put away in a museum. The conversation is changing, right? You have the UK Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, who promises to return Parthenon marbles if elected PM. The fact that restitutions are becoming a mainstream conversation is important. You have Emmanuel Macron, who's already started the process and set up the committee to return, objects back to Benin and Ghana and what have you. Um, you realize a narrative is changing when Hollywood latches on, right? So you have, there's a press conference for Monuments Men where Matt Damon and George Clooney actually lent weight to the idea that, history belongs to its geography. And if you think Matt Damon and George Clooney aren't sexy enough for your narrative, then here's the only human being that is Bill Murray, right? So Bill, it's amazing that this conversation is happening today, right? Now I'm going to end in a minute. What does it mean to us in India? So we've talked about the idea of colonization. We've talked about the idea of taking what was ours. We've talked about what it means in terms of collective psychology when disorders are normalized, whether it's kleptomania, whether it's cognitive dissonance, what have you. And obviously, if a particular behavior is normalized within a community, it is very tough to have a conversation, and therefore the resistance takes a lot of effort. Um, should we as Indians be happy that our Indian flag is being, put up on the whatever the Burj in Dubai and Empire State Building and what have you, and the Alps as it happened last year, right? Or is there something else we need to do to reclaim? Are there any alternative stories that exist? Right? One of the most common pushbacks I have is, hey, listen, why are you worried about heritage? India has already taken over UK in terms of being the fifth largest economy in the world. We're going to be 5 trillion. Our diplomatic efforts are more assertive today. India is putting up a really brave front. I mean, why are you stuck in the past? Right? And here's my response to them. We started with William Bentinck. I'm going to end with Karpuri Thakurji. True blue son of the soil. For those of you who don't have the historical context, he was the first chief minister of Bihar that was not upper caste. For those of you who remember or understand the whole idea of Uchi Jati and Nichi Jati. He was the first, in fact, a lot of the leaders you see in Bihar today, whether it is Nitish Kumar or Lalu or Yadav ji or whoever, were all interns and students under Karpuri Thakurji. He fought for the pride of the disenfranchised. He died penniless, but having won a huge, huge battle that wasn't won for centuries. What happened in the late 70s when his father died? He was a sitting chief minister. When his father died, he went back to his village. Now, for those of you who, just for context, he comes from, again, when we are talking of the caste system, your role in society or your place in society was dictated by your vocation. Now, the lineage he came from were essentially Babas, what were called Hajam in the older days. Right? When his father died, he went back to the village for the last rites and all of that. His father died of pneumonia because they couldn't afford a house with a pakka roof, and when it rained, the cold essentially took his father's life away. When he went back and wanted to do the last rites, the Thakurs or the upper caste of the village actually came to him and said, "Ki dekho, ab aaya oot pahad ke niche," right? So now you see that you are dependent on us, right? And said a line which was played out in the media verbatim, which said कि आप चीफ मिनिस्टर पटने में होगे, यहाँ तो आप हजाम हो, right? You might be a chief minister in Patna, but here you're still a Baba, right? And that is what happens in any oppressor victim scenario. As India tries to claim its place in the world, The only thing we need to focus on right now is to stop people from telling us कि बस यहाँ तो तुम हजाम हो. Right? You're not welcome here because guess what, little brown boy, you might be whoever you think you are. You might be taking our jobs away, etc., etc., etc. But you're not welcome here. The only response to that sort of unhealthy aggression is, you respond to a bully in only one language, and that's, I hope, reclaiming our heritage back is our way of saying that, hey, listen, the last remnant of colonization that you took from us, we will ensure that we bring it back. Bringing back our symbols is how we reclaim our civilization. And that's why this is important to us. With that, I'd really thank you all for taking the time off this afternoon. You have my name. I'm available on social media. Makaranji has my connects. More than happy to answer questions now or in the future. What I would really request from each of you is, do spread the word around. Use your good offices, use your WhatsApp groups, what have you, and explain the story to people. Um, Explain why India cannot claim its place till symbols of oppression still exist. Uh, this holds true for individuals. Uh, you might be trying to get out of an abusive relationship. You might be trying to get out of a boss that, get away from a boss that doesn't care. You might be stuck with narcissist friends, what have you. Right? We need to understand that we are dealing with what very clearly was abuse, was narcissism, was unacceptable, and that happens. Getting out of it or reversing it only happens when you reverse the physical memories of that abuse, which is exactly why I'd like each of you to join our effort and help in whichever way you can. With that, back to you, Makranji.
Thank you so much. That was very engrossing, riveting, as always. And it also made me think, because you brought in some new dimensions to this struggle. I thought it was interesting how you, tried to relate this history of spoilage and, should I say, loot, if I'm being not very polite, with the daily mental abuse and trauma that we continue to suffer today because of abusive relationships. I think this adds a psychological dimension and certainly helps us, even if we are not so engaged in the retrieval of stolen artifacts. It helps us engage and relate to it as a case of an archetypal abuse on a huge scale. The conquest of civilizations is also a form of an abusive relationship. And you mentioned Karpuri Thakur. I thought that was also a very interesting way to connect, the kind of struggles that we undergo in India, even today. These are live struggles with a deeper history, with a longer history of colonialism. And it also struck me how, let's also give the devil its due, as it were. It's easier to retrieve objects from Western museums because there are rules and laws, but there are many objects in other parts of the world. If you go to the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, you will see artifacts from all over the world, including what was purportedly Jesus' staff or Moses' staff or Jesus' bowl or artifacts from the entire region that the Ottomans had conquered and ruled. And there's not a single squeak about, getting some of those back. And there are some from India there as well, by the way. So the point I'm making is that the rights of conquest, so to speak, were recognized the world over. And colonialism was obviously fueled by the greed, of the European powers. It was easy plunder, and it was legitimated by a variety of ideologies, including religious ideologies. The plunder and destruction of South America was propped up by religious ideologies, by and large. And British colonialism was propped up by secular ideologies of reform and the white man's burden, liberalism, rights of man, and so forth. So these were some of the questions, I mean, thoughts that went through my mind, that I think there is a partnership here that is also possible, as is demonstrated with Emily G joining us. I think there's a greater scope today for restoration or restitution because common codes of conduct and civilized behavior have emerged. But there are parts of the world where these codes somehow don't seem to extend, and so we have to engage with that part of our, phase of colonialism, which we don't want to talk about even. So, and the plunder of the world, the destruction of monuments is going on even today. Bamiyan Buddhas is in our living memory. And ISIS, we've seen what happened when they overran parts of, the Levant and Syria, and, lots of artifacts were destroyed and sold. So it's a much deeper, and even today in Kashmir, there are many temples which are destroyed, etc. So this is a living problem. It's not just an East versus West problem. It's a much more complex problem, and we have to also earn the right, to safeguard our own traditions. And I love the point about, this Nataraja coming back, the presence of the deity. This is profound because in our legal system, the deity is a living person, okay? Though sometimes he's treated or she's treated as a minor. So you have to litigate on behalf of a minor because they can't speak up for themselves. And our friend Sai Deepak and all has written, extensively about this, how we have to litigate on behalf of the deities. Because once they have pran pratisthapana, they are living entities, they have lands, they have titles, they have rights, and so forth. So I think that, fascinating. And I just wanted to add a footnote about the sale of Taj. Part of it is apocryphal. There's a wonderful article by Sir Percival Spear. It was published in 1949, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can pull it up because I'd saved it earlier. And it was published in the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society. And it ends with this conclusion. He provided. The conclusion seems unwarranted that while Bentinck did in fact order the sale of some marble in a Mughal bathroom in the Agra fort, the Taj story was an imaginative addition by his military critics. And I might say that what's really happening today is there's a lot of myth making around these things. In fact, I was reading about this when you mentioned the Taj, and somebody says the British sold the Taj for 1.5 lakhs to some Lakshmi Das Seth, and there's a story that the local people, somehow rallied Seth Lakshmi Chand of Mathura for 1.5 lakhs, and the local artisans. So there are a lot of Marxist myths also around it, because what they wanted to show is these artisans whom Shah Jahan patronized, supposedly, and they lived in a colony near the Taj, they rose in arms, in a Hindu-Muslim resistance to this purported sale. So, you see, we have to be very careful. And I, for one, by the way, I respect myths, because in India, we are a land of myths. But there are different kinds of truths. There is a historical truth which needs a particular kind of evidence and a particular kind of documentation. And then there is a poetic truth, and then there's an ideological truth. So I think the point is well taken that the British shook the pagoda tree and all the coins that dropped. And I think one of the best ways, the best example is start with William Dalrymple's opening statement, where he talks about this castle in Wales, which has the hugest plunder from India, and you can go and see it today. You can see it. And that is the place where what Clive alone took is there. So please look at that. That's a better evidence because those artifacts are there and there's a whole history of that. But these other stories are somewhat apocryphal, and we have to be careful when we peddle them because they sometimes may injure our cause. Okay, having said that, I'm throwing this open, and one person asks, are we going to get a certificate of participation? I don't know who's asked this, but this is not what we normally do, whoever the person is, because we are not a degree awarding institute, and I don't know why you need these certificates, but frankly, this is not what we normally do, and this is a webinar, it's not a proper seminar. Okay, are there any other questions? Somebody said, let me see here if I can.
While while we wait for questions, can I just make a quick couple of responses?
Please,
Yeah,
please,
Makanji.
please, 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 please do.
So this is my hypothesis. So you mentioned whether these religious conquests are there, were these for other reasons, etc., etc. Um, there were some conquests that were purely, the Crusades, as an example, were purely religious in nature. Colonization, on the other hand, it's fascinating. When Christopher Columbus wanted the Queen to, this of course in Spain, to fund the expedition, in the letter, which is, you can get a copy of it on the PDF online, he mentions the word gold 17 times, gold or wealth. And the word Lord and God is mentioned just once, right? So the myth around Christopher Columbus is that, listen, he wanted to spread the word of God, and which is why he set out and blah, blah, blah. But that wasn't what his, let's say, his budget proposal, if I may, actually said. So I'm tilted to assume that colonization, which is separate from the Crusades, was only about wealth. Um, Taking away what was yours, it could be your dignity, it could be your heritage, it could be whatever it is, was a tool of oppression. What we would today call gaslighting, as an example, in individual relationship kind of circumstances. So that's the kind of view I have of these things. If it is gaslighting, and how do we respond, etc., etc. I was watching David Letterman's. I'm forgetting what it's called, but there's this new show on Netflix where they bring in one guest for a full hour. Um, and this was an episode with Robert Downey Jr. And this is going back into saying, Kecha, what do we do about Turkey? What do we do about nations that might not have a well-established code of conduct or law of the land? And Robert Downey Jr. said two words which really stuck with me. So David Letterman asked him that, look, you've had a history of substance abuse, you've run away from rehab, you've gone back multiple times into your old ways, you've been self-destructive, etc., etc. So how come you've been sober for a decade? And he just said, ultimatums work. That's it. So sometimes it is just about the gorilla going and sitting wherever the heck he knows his right is, and that's about it.
No, perfect. See, we are on the same page, no question. And the show, I think, of David Letterman's is my next guest needs no introduction, I
Yes,
think
there you
that's
go.
what his show is called. Listen, speaking of the media, I love the way you brought in Indiana Jones and all that, but don't forget Lara Croft and the Tomb Raider. So you see, it's not just men. See, women are also Tomb Raiders, and it's sad that that empowering women through images of people, who are sort of ball busting, out there, ladies, is somehow also tied up with plundering, the passive Orient, which is a kind of new Orientalism. In other words, that how do you prove your prowess? You prove your prowess by going to countries. And you see, after all, Indiana Jones was America's answer to some extent to James Bond, because it was that kind of a swashbuckling. And of course, he's a professor too, or a whatever, anthropologist to boot. So these are very deep. And, Temple of Doom was for me, my goodness, Amrish Puri also playing this sinister creature. So what I'm simply saying is the world of today is far more complicated, and we have to see collaborations and partnerships from a variety of actors. And I
Yep.
think you're absolutely right that name and shame is the name of the game. And speaking of museums, think about your great museum in Singapore, the Museum of Asian Civilizations. There have been artifacts there that have a dubious provenance, manner in which they were acquired. They're very beautifully displayed there. So all I'm saying is, once you, like you guys have done, once you highlight how this whole nexus operates, every other museum is going to be 100 times more careful, to try and acquire these objects through these clandestine and the gray market, as it were, and put them on display. They're all going to, in fact, I'll tell you before we go to questions, I have a friend who is a collector, okay? And he's a very respected man, and he actually loaned out several of his collection to the to the Chhatrapati Shivaji Sangralaya in Mumbai. Okay, it's a very respectable museum, the best in Mumbai, you would say. And because of all this, the museum returned all his stuff. Okay, he had given it free. Okay, and they returned it. Prince of Wales Museum, it used to be called. It's a very, very famous museum in a beautiful building. They said, sir, please get each of these objects certified. And only when we know how you acquired them and they're all properly certified as legit, will we take them back. So, my friend had to go through so much red tape, but that's worth it. It's the same thing that people who have FCRA today go through. They have to prove to the government that they're not getting funds for abroad for whatever nefarious purposes in order to continue. So I'm saying whatever has happened in the last 10, 20 years has had a salutary effect, you see, and for the acquisition of Indian artifacts, right? And good. So here I have a few questions already coming in. So one of the questions is, and in fact, I'll take two of them. One is from Professor Madhav Hada. And he said that, what, they didn't take all these objects just for loot, but they took them also for curiosity. See, जिज्ञासा और समझाने के लिए भी ले गए. क्या आप ऐसे लोगों की पहचान अलग से करेंगे? So that was one question, that people who took objects for study, for curiosity, okay, not only for loot and plunder. Like Darwin. Darwin took things from all over those Pagos Islands, and he needed the fossils or whatever. You can say it's plunder. History belongs to geography. In this case, you might say paleontology or fossil study belongs to geography. But he took them to England, back home. He studied them. He arranged them. So